Hey there, it's Nathaniel Grimm, and welcome to my forecast for November 2024. Now, this video will overview the key highlights and key themes of the month ahead. We're also going to look back at October, and I will give a very detailed preview of what each zodiac sign can expect, and you'll want to reference your sun, moon, and rising signs for that forecast. So I'll share my screen, and as always, I will sort of have this as a placeholder visual reference as we talk about the month of November. I'm going to review the whole month, but just for now, I'm going to be just keeping it at the middle of the month as a nice midpoint. So essentially, this month of November is defined by really the Mars-Pluto opposition. So you'll notice here in this chart, we do still have the Mars-Pluto opposition. It is because Mars is about to retrograde, the opposition will continue on throughout the month and actually throughout December and January. So this Mars-Pluto opposition is extremely intense, especially this month because we will have a Scorpio new moon that is activating both of the ruling planets of Scorpio, which are Mars and Pluto. This month is also defined by Venus squaring Saturn and Neptune and opposing Jupiter. We will also have Pluto entering Aquarius for the final time and just staying in Aquarius for 2 decades. And we will have a full moon conjunct Uranus, as well as Saturn stationing direct. So let me translate all of that for you. Just like, again, these headline stories are that the Mars-Pluto opposition will bring about a lot of like unrelenting just tension, oppositional forces between people. It will intensify your energy, but before Mars retrograde, it will also show that any overly obsessive behavior or just any sort of like rabbit holes that you go down, they could exhaust you at some point. So you definitely want to be watchful of that. Also, Mars Pluto is showing that people are experiencing these overwhelming desires for things, whether that be financial success or whether that be physical desires. And even like with Mars opposite Pluto, sometimes it's this energy of like holding on to frustration and like not being able to let it go. So in general, this month is again, it's fairly overwhelming actually, and I think that it's very hard for people to forfeit like a position on something, a desire for something, and especially when it comes to like their philosophies on life, because we will have like Mercury in Sag opposing Jupiter and Gemini. So like, if I were to just like show you the progression of the month, so I'm just going to click through and just kind of take you through the celestial narrative. So it's like what's happening in November is like not only are people doubling down and sort of fiercely desiring things, but we also have, as we go through the motions here, you see Mercury is starting to oppose Jupiter. And then at some point this month, it starts to retrograde. And it's like, oh, wait, there's more information coming out. There's more information coming out. And this is making us, with Mars opposite Pluto, even more upset about something, or it's doubling down on our convictions about it. We're even more certain that we don't want to give up. And so nobody is really willing to give up this month, which makes me slightly worried about this month. I feel like a lot of people are just overly driven towards like one exact outcome and they're refusing to lose, they're refusing to back down. But again, like in your personal life, this can actually be really empowering because it's like, you are, again, you're not giving up on something. And also Saturn is going to station direct on this Taurus full moon. So the things that you're not willing to give up on could be professionally productive for you, or it could help you, really assemble your long-term goals. Now, the Venus Saturn square and the Venus Neptune square before that, which is in the beginning part of November, is showing that there are some, and it's really not even squaring Saturn, by the way, at this point, but very, very beginning of November, people may still be having some pretty serious discussions in relationships or, with Venus square Saturn, there could be like very sobering discussions between people, whether it's about business or media with Venus and Sag or spending. People are making, I think, financial commitments at that time, and maybe even for travel purposes with Venus and Sag. But with Venus opposing Jupiter as well, I do think that people are able to come to sort of a positive resolution in some of their financial situations or relationships. But then heading into the following week, we do have Venus square Neptune. So I think a lot of people are feeling confused about where their values are at. I actually do think a lot of people this month are kind of like waffling on like what exactly, number one, what do I want to spend money on? Who do I want to be with? Who do I politically support? Like I just see a lot of wavering actually. And it's interesting that November 5th is the day of the election in the US, and like Venus is pretty much squaring Neptune and opposing Jupiter. So it does feel like people are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, and they're kind of malleable. They're kind of willing to see the truths on many different sides. And it just yeah, it's just really it's a bit of an awkward placement. But Venus opposing Jupiter at the same time, I think is restoring some people's faith in like a partnership with the square to Neptune. And you don't want it to be blind faith, but combined with the Mars-Pluto opposition, there could even be like extreme desires. So people could have like pretty passionate, like intimate relationships at this time. Or they could even just again like spend a ton of money or be kind of obsessed with making money. I don't know, there's just like a lot of again, there's a lot of transmutational power here though. It's like you can turn some of the more like overwhelming desires into something I think positive though. It's like with Mars opposite Pluto, it's like either you're standing up for the disenfranchised, or you're standing up for a cause, or you are standing up for what you believe in with Venus opposite Jupiter. I think that like some people's values, I know I just said that they may waffle in some ways, but I do think also some people's values may suddenly crystallize. So, anyways, we also have Pluto ingress into Aquarius, and this is happening November 19th, and this is really the final time, right, that Pluto is going into Aquarius. So that is going to really cement this new era of Pluto in Aquarius, which is trending towards the sort of the common person, people, the masses, like people are going to feel as though celebrity status continues to be irrelevant, that elitism is just not really it's sort of like frowned upon essentially at a certain point. Like, and this is gonna percolate over 2 decades, right? So it's not gonna happen overnight. But we're seeing obviously the end of fame, the end of celebrity, which I predicted 2 years ago. And it's really lifting up the everyday. It's lifting up the masses. It's lifting up the person who feels a camaraderie with those around them, but still maintains independence. So I do think that more ideals around like just you know uh equitable ideas, like being equanimous, like those ideals are going to percolate more and more. But I'm not trying to paint a utopia to you. While Pluto's in Aquarius, there's going to be first that Pluto opposition to the World War II Pluto. So, power games are going to be played, and the global war that's going on is going to intensify over the next couple of years. But I do think in the long run of the 2 decade timeline, eventually I think we will reach a state where people are much more liberated, hopefully, much more free to live out their authentic lives, however that happens through political or non-political means. And then the full moon conjunct Uranus during Saturn's direct station on November 15th is surprising. It's definitely going to be shocking, surprising, and it's going to change the way we look at certain, like maybe governmental structures, organizations, institutions, even parents or parenting. And it's going to change our, again, long-term plans. And hopefully this is a good surprise for you with Mercury opposite Jupiter, but there's still a lot of intensity with this Mars-Pluto opposition, but whatever doorway opens for you here, the Mars-Pluto opposition can help you, again, relentlessly pursue it at all costs. Now, in terms of the key ingresses this month, we do have Mercury entering Sag November 2nd, Venus entering Capricorn November 11th, Mars entering Leo November 3rd, the Sun entering Sagittarius November 21st, and Pluto again entering Aquarius November 19th. So, with all of that said, I'm going to shift and talk about the key transits of the month. And I've already touched on some of them, but just to give you dates around these things. So, we start off the month with Venus opposing Jupiter November 1st through 6th. That Venus-Jupiter opposition is, again, it can be a positive. It can help you see, you can have a better perspective on your spending, your career. Maybe there's some creative breakthroughs at that time. But also, I think people are starting to see a bigger picture here and a future either with somebody or maybe even in their social life. But I think that relationships have like some kind of like long-term view to them at this time. So because Jupiter is the future, and even though Jupiter's retrograde here, I think that it is reflective, but Venus and Sag restores some optimism, I think. And that's following the Venus-Saturn square essentially. So it's almost like people have had more serious talks at the beginning of the month and now they're ready to plan for the future. Again, whether it's like financial planning or planning out your financial life with somebody or planning out where you want your relationship to go. But along the way, we will have Venus square Neptune. Now, that can, in some ways, add even more compassionate feelings into a relationship. So people may feel as though they can actually believe that a relationship will work out. If someone is not discerning, though, it could lead to a deceptive dynamic in a relationship where somebody overpromises to you. But if you're like a spiritual person and you want to be with someone who aligns with you on like long-term vision, long-term values, I actually don't dislike this square at all. I think that you could really affirm that, hey, like we really do share a lot of the same beliefs about life and a lot of the same philosophies, and like we can really form a union here. Um, and again, Mars will oppose Pluto the whole month. I've already talked about that, but that just feels like the conflicts are kind of intractable. They are ongoing, they're consistent. I do think people will continue to double down on like political positions, their philosophies. They will continue to experience intensified desires, either physically or financially. And a lot of people could be fighting within families with Mars and Cancer, fighting over custody, fighting over assets, fighting over homes, properties, fighting over wills or inheritances, um, fighting with landlords, roommates. It is definitely with Mars and Cancer showing that there's a lot of tension within families, which actually makes sense also during like the election in the US. But um, you want to focus your energy on things that you will have to have some obsessions this month. I know that sounds controversial and weird, but like you just have to make sure there's healthy obsessions. You have to make sure that you're obsessed with something like, let's say, um, I don't know, cleansing or cleansing your like health and like being healthier, or it's like you're focused on your financial success, or you're focused on breath work or meditation. Make sure it's a healthy obsession, but I do think that no matter what, there will be no moderation in November. Moderation is completely absent. And we're all kind of like channeling our inner Scorpio at this time. So whenever I have Scorpio clients or Plutonic clients, I tell them this. I say, you will have some tendency towards obsession in your life. Again, make sure it's a positive obsession for what that's worth. And if you feel a conviction here that there's a policy you want to advocate for, belief system you want to stand up for, or just a position you want to stake, like in any kind of situation. I think that you can sort of like double down on it, but you just want to obviously you want to find you don't want to reach such an extreme that you're willing to like completely decimate certain foundations in your life for it. I do think that a lot of people though will reset this month. They will kind of like reset a lot of aspects of their lives, whether it's like they decide to like move across the country or across the world, they decide to start over with their business, they decide to again like maybe completely just separate from their families for a bit or come back to them. I just think Mars Pluto is showing that like the conflict is not easily resolved. And so some people may choose to just like go their separate ways because of that. But again, like if you want to play a powerful role this month, I think you will find what sort of what light is guiding you at the end of all things. Like as you rip away like any other layers that are superficial, like you will see like what that fire inside looks like. And Mars Pluto just like is either fully concentrated on something, getting something done, or is realizing like what the soul's evolutionary journey looks like and is willing to follow that path regardless of what it has to maybe sacrifice or purge, I think. Because Mars is really the needs of the body in a lot of ways, and Pluto's the evolutionary, it's the higher octave of Mars, so it's the evolutionary needs of the soul. So I think a lot of you will have to, again, commit to a path. And even though like it's committing to a path that serves your soul's evolution, but Mars will retrograde. So I'm not saying that, that path won't be revisited to some extent, but I know this is complicated advice, but essentially like think about like what you need at that soul level, but don't necessarily like feel as though you're burning everything to the ground. I feel like, again, Mars Pluto can be very destructive, so you have to avoid that. But stay true to like what your again like what your evolutionary path is, your dharma, your potential. Like we're talking about like things that will I mean I really think that they will change like the whole arc of your life because it's like because you're tapping into something that's either been deeply buried or hidden or repressed, and you just haven't been aware of the true resilience that you have until now. Like Mars Pluto is kind of like that energy of like running a full marathon, like 26 miles, and having and participating in that without ever having actually run 26 miles until then. So it's asking you to push beyond your limits. It's asking you to continue when you're exhausted. That's what November feels like. It's like the 25th and 26th mile of the marathon. So it's going to be really tough for everybody, but like as you reach that last mile, you will break apart pessimism, limitation, you're breaking down walls. You are again seeing that your soul has like a true capacity that goes infinitely beyond your physical capacity. So yeah, I mean that's that's a really again intense moment, and everyone's just caught in this crucible of transformation. Now, Pluto leaving Capricorn, I do think is going to also bring about. It's going to show, I think, that a lot of people from like the baby boomer generation and the generation before them are like the silent generation. They are starting to either retire. In the case of boomers, I think a lot of boomers are retiring at this time or transferring their, again, finances over to a family member or someone else. And the silent generation, a lot of them are starting to phase out. Like, it's just the reality of like Pluto leaving Capricorn for the final time. People born with Pluto in Cancer, it's not that they're all like disappearing or departing this world, but I think a lot of them have been in the last few weeks, or families have had to deal with like just discussions about inheritance and wills. And and it's also just symbolically maybe they are starting to go a little bit more behind the scenes, and they're not really participating in daily life as much. This is just how like Pluto works. I mean, Pluto's a generational planet, so generations with Pluto and Cancer are starting to. Um, I'm not saying that like if you're someone with Pluto and Cancer, you're watching this video, like I'm not saying that there's no purpose left. It's just that they will wield less influence increasingly as Pluto goes into Aquarius, and then even some baby boomers, some of the older baby boomers are beginning to think about you know, retiring, shifting their financials around, reshuffling them within families. And, boomers are starting to think about like, what legacy am I leaving behind for, the following generations? So, this is the fact that Pluto is changing signs during Scorpio season with Pluto ruling Scorpio is just like so significant, right? And like it's impossible to overstate how significant it is with Pluto, at 29 cap during an election cycle. I mean, we are seeing a phasing out of the old guard, and we are seeing that the status quo is not sufficient. And so any candidates who um, are diametrically opposed to the status quo, I think have a leg up, even though the election is happening during Pluto and Cap still. By the time we get to Inauguration Day, it's Pluto and Aquarius, conjunct the sun. So, people are really yearning for change across the world, and millennials and Gen Zs are saying like, when is it my turn as well to have a voice? So there's a lot of like this is the turning, that is really the way to describe it. It's like it is the turning, and there's definitely going to be a passing of the torch at this time, and it could happen very suddenly. to be honest. And then we also have, again, Mercury squares Saturn as Venus enters Capricorn November 11th. Mercury squares Saturn could bring about some disappointing news, but it's also like showing that a lot of business-like discussions are happening while Venus is in Cap. It's like this is the time to really have like big meetings, serious meetings with people. Any focused like analytical sort of tasks should be completed at that time. The Sun will oppose Uranus in mid-November during that full moon, of course. This is when people will be at peak restlessness and like looking for change, looking to change the status quo. And Mercury is opposing Jupiter from November 17th through the end of the month. Mercury opposing Jupiter retrograde is kind of like I'm imagining like someone's mind and it's like a hot air balloon. Like all of a sudden there's like more and more information it's being filled up with. And that information is either changing someone's perspective or their mind. And I think honestly, a lot of people will regret voting who they voted for after they vote. And there's nothing you can really do about that. I think that's just like astrologically. It's just showing that a lot of people are either realizing like, wow, I wish I had that information when I voted for them, or they're realizing that there's more information coming out after November 5th, and like that's like sort of surprising them. It's like more information to make sense of, and it's like so confusing. It's like, what's going on here? Like, what is the verdict? Like, when is the verdict coming in? Like, now there's more and more variables also being introduced. And so I don't think anyone's really feeling satisfied, honestly. I think that out of all the elections that I've either, been alive for or just like witnessed the astrology of, like this is the election that is the least satisfying. There is almost like no way that either side will be satisfied for different reasons. So it's almost like the outcome just feels so anticlimactic to me. Feels like extremely anticlimactic. No one is gonna feel vindicated. Everyone is gonna feel like a sore loser. Everyone's gonna feel like it's just like a lose-lose situation, honestly. So yeah, I'm not really looking forward to November personally, on that level. I think it's just gonna feel like kind of again, there's just too much information at a certain point. There's too many variables, and there's really a lot of reasons to feel dissatisfied and not a lot of reasons to feel satisfied about the outcome. Because like with Mercury retrograde in Sag, it's just so bloated and inflamed, and it's TMI. There's just too much being introduced to the equation, whether it's through news stories or things the candidates are saying that again you wish they hadn't said, or you wonder why they didn't say that before they were nominated or elected. It's so cringe to me because like Mercury retrograde in Sag like doesn't really know when to stop talking. It does not. I mean, I have Mercury and Sag direct, and I already don't know when to stop talking. So it's like, the Mercury retrograde here, opposite of retrograde Jupiter. It's like you're reading a book. It's like reading Ulysses by James Joyce, except, it's like translated into a language you don't know, and like the chapters are all scrambled up. It's like, what am I looking at here? So yeah, very, very exhausting. Venus will square Chiron and trine Uranus at the end of the month, though. Kind of interesting. Venus square Chiron can always bring up a little bit of like painful dynamics in a relationship, but like trine Uranus, there could be like creative solutions to healing in a relationship. So let's go into like let's get out of the transit discussion and just like sort of elevate this discussion and talk about November in the context of October. And again, I'm just gonna park this visual here as November 15th just to have a visual aid as we go through. But let's just look at the pretext of November. So October began with a solar eclipse in Libra, which really like redefined the arc of many relationships and alliances. And it built up, I think, an incredibly stressful but potentially healing Aries full moon conjunct Chiron in mid-October. Like many people probably broke new ground with their healing journey or dealt with deeply rooted soul fragmentations. Like literally people may have been recovering lost parts of their soul. This may have begun almost like a shamanic journey for some people. Meanwhile, the Mars-Pluto opposition already took shape, and this made people incredibly obsessed with getting their way or controlling various situations. And really, power struggles could have erupted in a number of areas in your life, but it definitely did on a geopolitical level because we saw North Korea beginning to join forces with Russia. Israel retaliated against Iran in late October, as I predicted, and I'll show you why. This is because, late October, we had Mars beginning to square the position of Mars on October 7th of 2023, which is when the conflicts between Israel and Hezbollah really ignited in a new way, I should say. So look at where Mars was October 7th, 27 Libra. Look at where Mars was on October 26th and 25th. Pretty much an exact square to that Mars. So if you go back to my October YouTube, I show this chart. I show that late October, 25, 26, 27. This is when the conflict between Israel and, Hezbollah or Iran, like really, really escalates and reaches a new level. And this is exactly what happens. Now, because Mars will retrograde back to this position, even though you may have read in the news that like, they consider this like retaliation to be like final, it's definitely not over. Mars retrograde will reignite that. So that story is continuing. So unfortunately, I do see the geopolitical landscape to be increasingly turbulent, especially with Mars opposite Pluto, right? It's like, and even with Mars in Cancer, people could be fighting over territory, and nobody is willing to let things go here. Now, what happened in October generally here? Which predictions did I get right, and which ones were not obviously reflected in the news? So I foresaw some kind of sanitation and health issues to follow a hurricane in this fall season, and that's exactly what happened in Florida. So we did see a news story about how a flesh-eating bacteria was spreading in Florida after two hurricanes, and this is something I predicted based on the fact that Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces, squaring Jupiter, which is, Jupiter can be storms, and Neptune is health, and Saturn in Pisces brings about water-related disasters and health issues. Um, I said Donald Trump would be involved with a situation that recalled his obsession with Diet Coke. It had some tangential relation to health, arteries, etc. And I said that this would occur around October 17th. In that mid-October timeframe, he did work a shift at McDonald's. And if you go back to my October YouTube video, I highlighted how the news story about his Diet Coke obsession broke on December, I think, 11th, 2017. The full moon in Aries was conjunct the Uranus from that time. So it was showing that something surprising would happen related to that whole like industry of like sodas and like, restaurants associated with, I guess, like fast food. And he surprised people by working a shift at McDonald's that day. So that is exactly the deep astrology that you would witness when you see that a full moon is conjunct the Uranus from the breaking of that news story about his Diet Coke obsession. So I also said there would be something going on with his head during the full moon. And indeed, one of the headline stories during that day, that literal day, had to do with questions about his mental fitness during a rally where he cued the music early and stood there for about a half hour instead of taking questions. And, during that time, we also had a couple of days after that, we had him at a rally saying, I have no cognitive, I have no cognitive. So he was sort of speaking in incomplete sentences. So I do think that my prediction was accurate. I do think something happened. It just like was not like fully divulged or reported in the news. I also saw something major happening October 22nd with the US chart and his chart. And in my mind's eye, I kept thinking that it had something to do with his airplane. And he did, in fact, forego taking his usual airplane on that day, according to flight data, while attending rallies, which I find to be very interesting. So I do think that prediction was also accurate. Um, but again, as you can see with the astrology, it's just not, it's like with these predictions, they will be like thematically accurate and technically accurate. It's just that the extent of the event is where it can be hard to predict. I said that Israel would escalate the Middle East war in the final week of October again due to the Mars square and to the October 7th Mars position. This is exactly what happened. Again, Mars will retrograde back to that position in January, so the story is not complete yet. I also said that arteries would be blocked in October and that people would be demanding fairer contracts. And also, I've been speaking all year about maritime and seafaring drama, and the port workers on the East Coast in the US went on strike during the Libra eclipse. So, another accurate prediction. And we are seeing alliances continue to change since that eclipse, like unfamiliar friends and enemies across the world. Maybe not unfamiliar friends, but like Russia and North Korea uniting there, countries continuing to turn against Israel. That all fits. I also saw world leaders being under duress or making bold moves. Now, this happened around the full moon in Aries. I said that this would happen. There was an attempt, I believe, by either Iran or Hezbollah to basically, take out Netanyahu, and it doesn't look like he was. I don't think he was at his house at that time, but there was some kind of attempt. We also saw Putin pressing forward with new strategies regarding Ukraine and collaborating with North Korea. So what will November bring? So I want to review my election prediction, which I made in the middle of July. So I made this prediction in the middle of July, and that was almost 4 months ago, and I haven't touched the prediction since then. So let's review what I got right and what is still unfolding. So at the time, Biden was still the nominee. And I said that Harris would take over around July 23rd. And Biden actually stepped down on July 21st. So I was 2 days off. But at the time, I think it was still a pretty bold prediction to say that Harris would even be the nominee. I said that Harris would trail in the polls up until October 17th, the Aries full moon, because I saw some kind of setback around that time for Trump. In fact, there was no legitimate or apparent setback for Trump apart from some pockets of questioning about his cognition. So again, he said, I have no cognitive over and over at a rally. However, these incidents did not actually tip the scales. If anything, Trump has actually gained in the polls. Now, he faced no real setback from October 17th to 26th, which was kind of the days when I actually saw the most challenge for him. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what I mean by this. So just bear with me a second. I have to pull up a different software. So looking at Donald Trump's transits here, let me go back to the Zoom call. Yeah, so looking at Trump's transits right now, it's like what was going on October 17th. I mean, that's a gnarly full moon for him. Mars was literally conjunct the sun's position on July 13th at that rally in Pennsylvania. On his anti-vertex, Mars ruling the full moon in Aries, Chiron's basically squaring his Saturn. Pluto's in conjunct to his ascendant. Uranus is retrograde, back squaring his Mars. Mercury squaring his Pluto, which is like a really dangerous transit in some cases during I don't know, like a significant lunation. Like Princess Diana during her accident, Mercury was retrograde on her Pluto. So like, the Mercury Pluto thing, it happens, like Mercury Pluto aspects are common. They happen all the time, multiple times a year, but it can be very foreshadowing juxtaposed with a really significant full moon. And like he's born on a Sag eclipse, and Sag is like travel and flight. So it's like opposite Uranus. Jupiter's on his Uranus still. So it's a highly unpredictable chart right now. So like that remains true. But I just felt like there was a lot of challenging aspects for him on the 17th, and like it played out in the ways that I've already mentioned. But then we had the moon in Taurus, which I think is a nice change from the Aries full moon there. But then it was in Gemini on his Uranus during a lunar standstill, and like, this creates to me a lot of unpredictability, especially with like travel. And then you get into the 12th house moon, conjunct his Mercury, while Mercury scoring his Pluto. It's like all these aspects are really bizarre to me. Mars on Venus can be positive, of course, but then we had the moon going into Leo. Leo rules, the heart, circulation. On his Pluto, while the sun was on JD Vance's Pluto, and JD Vance's sun is on Trump's Pluto. I mean, you do the math, and it's like you stack up so many variables that almost like scream the same outcome. And despite all of that, it's like it seems like he's still barreling forward towards a victory. And now, and honestly, like the moon in Leo, once the moon left his Mars conjunction there, I don't think he has that many challenging aspects leading up to the election at this point. So what I saw in my October prediction is essentially that Harris was going to be trailing the whole time, and I mean, she was like trailing. I mean, she wasn't necessarily trailing him the whole time, but she definitely was not seen as like an obvious victor. Ever since she took the nomination, there's been a lot of questions. But because Trump was able to sail through those extremely difficult transits, the 17th through the 26th, I just don't really see what would stand in his way at this point. And the I mean, the only wrench could be Mars entering Leo and becoming co-present with his Pluto. I mean, it is within 10 degrees of a conjunction at that time. So I do think that, the Mars Leo retrograde I don't think it's like positive for him, even though he has Mars in Leo. It's like a retrograde Mars, right? In this case, in the transits. But Jupiter retrograde has really dashed the hopes of the Harris campaign in a lot of ways. Like, I'll show you her chart as well. Like, her Gemini rising is, I don't think is an asset right now for her. And this is why, a lot of astrologers can get a little too, I don't know, giddy about Jupiter transits. Like, it's not really enough of a reason to say that somebody would win. So, we talk about Jupiter as luck or something, right? And abundance. And historically, when I do predictions and I look at clients' transits, Jupiter honestly just brings perspective. And sometimes that perspective brings you perspective about opportunities, and that leads to luck. But Jupiter can either like inflame, augment things, it can also just bring you more perspective that, hey, like I need to change some things here. So if you look at Harris's chart, part of the reason that I was in my election prediction, like really seeing her as actually ultimately though, being in a position to win is because her secondary progressed moon is conjunct the US sun, which is like really powerful. But anyways, I'll get to that in a second. Jupiter retrograde in early October and still retrograde in her first house as a Gemini rising is causing people to think like basically WTF? Like who am I really voting for here? Because Gemini risings can, especially with Jupiter transiting their first house, can really suffer from a condition just called TMI. It's like too much information. They are not answering questions very directly. It's all word salad, right? And so, to get back to that, essentially like Jupiter and Gemini has contributed to the word salad style of her answers, which even like CNN pointed out after her like town hall. The retrograde is calling into question like the strength of her candidacy because she's not reassuring insiders or voters when she speaks and she answers questions. I do think it's like extremely, she's just like avoiding the direct answer. It's very meandering. And also, Trump has Regulus on his ascendant, so there is a sort of a vibe with him that it's like he gets to where he wants to without much effort and amasses success. Like Harris does not have Regulus activated, but Saturn is actually kind of opposing her Regulus, which I find interesting. Maybe that's almost a net negative for her. I mean, but if you look back to Harris's chart again, I guess we'll just go back there. If anything, when it comes to the fixed stars, she has her sun conjunct Algorab, which has much more unfortunate associations, and the moon opposite Algorab. And again, though, the one quote unquote trump card that Harris has is that her secondary progressed moon is conjunct the US sun, which again, it did drive the bulk of my prediction about her. But, alternatively, that transit technically is already happening. Like the moon is already at 13 Cancer in her progress chart. So this could indicate that she's essentially playing the role of president right now, even if it's just symbolic, and that her peak is already set in. But don't underestimate the power of that alignment, right? Like she could still pull this off, but I'm thinking that Trump right now has an 80% chance of winning, because he was able to withstand the Aries full moon and all the way through the Leo moon on his Mars. I think that he's shown that he can kind of, again, I think this has a lot to do with his Regulus on the ascendant kind of story. When we're kind of like talking about presidential candidates, we have to dig into the fixed stars because I think a lot of like presidential candidates will have this sort of like, I don't know if it's like interdimensional, intergalactic, but they will have this very like larger than life like sort of energy about them. And for him, it's Regulus on the ascendant. With Kamala, I don't see I don't see the fixed stars like working in her favor quite as much. Like Jupiter is not near Alcyone, like you can't like give her the Pleiades there. The Pleiades are not connected to her. Again, Saturn is almost squaring Alcyone, squaring the Pleiades. I feel like her Saturn placement is like weirdly blocking some of that fixed star energy, you could argue. But well, if you go by the fixed stars though, she does have the midheaven conjunct Fomalhaut and the IC actually close to Regulus, but it's still 2 degrees off. But either way, like I think that Trump is yet again proving that he can just buck the expectations, which again, I see why. I see why I was sort of like seeing Harris as the more likely winner in July. And when I made that prediction again, like Biden was still the nominee. So I still think that the prediction has legs. I still think I think she has a chance, but I think Trump is like really starting to pull ahead. But even if Trump wins, here's the real kicker in my prediction. So hopefully you're still, you know, so if you turned off the video right before this next thing, it's like you're not really seeing the whole story here. Yeah, like even if Trump wins, I don't see how he gets to inauguration day. I just don't see it. The Mars retrograde cycle is going to be really challenging for him, going back to his Saturn. But also the most telling aspect is that Mars will retrograde and square the January 6th, 2021 Mars position. So I'll show you that as well. So January 6th, 2025, and let's add in January 6th. Let's overlay it with January 6th, 2021 really quick here. Like look at this chart, and it says Venus in Cap, but just ignore that. Look at January 6th, 2021 on the inside wheel, and look at January 6th, 2025 on the outside wheel. What do you see? Mars retrograde exactly squaring the post-shadow Mars in Aries of that, riot on the Capitol. And to me, this looks like January 6th redux. And that wouldn't occur unless Trump supporters felt upset or slighted by the outcome or by what goes down between his nomination, his election, and the inauguration. So, like, this aspect alone tells me that there's more drama and that most of the drama will begin after the election. And, like, with Mercury opposite Jupiter throughout the month of November, it's like leading up to that, it's the equivalent of, like, oh, wait, there's more information. And we also have, the new moon in Sag on Antares, which Antares has a very like foreboding sort of energy to it. And Antares is another fixed star associated with the Crusades and like very fated events. So like if you look at a number of historical events, they've actually occurred when Mercury was on Antares. So like if you go, let's say to or not Mercury, but like some planet was on Antares. So let me edit this chart on the top here. So if you were to go to like November 22nd, 1963. So if you were to go to that chart and then you compare that to the new moon on Antares, which I think is November 30th of this month. Like calculate that. And I mean it's like the new moon is on the Mercury placement from November 22nd, 1963. And it's like I've been seeing 2-2s like all over the place. And I told you about my 2-2 prediction on my other channels, and like I thought October 22nd was a huge day, and I think it was, but I think November 22nd, December 22nd, January 22nd. I'm getting numerological here and using a Gregorian calendar system, but I still think I keep getting signals that like 22, the 22nd day of like all the next few months is just like massive. And I have actually been seeing 11:22 on the clock like a lot without trying to see it. So like if you look at, Mercury retrograde on that Mars, new moon on that Mars, like there's some bizarre stuff here. So it just feels to me like with the actual election itself, I do think that Trump has the odds are in his favor at this point. But I just feel like with Mars opposite Pluto creating a really dark energy, and whatnot, it feels like January 6th, like there's a group of people and supporters who feel like fairly devastated by something. And Mars retrograde in Cancer is like people saying, hey, I'm going to defend my turf, like no matter what. So I think like November is like only the beginning, I think, of like a huge turning point in the United States. And yeah, I mean it's so to just like summarize this, how will the election play out? I mean, barring a completely exogenous event, I believe Trump has an 80% chance of winning right now. But again, I don't see how he would end up being inaugurated as the 47th president. I think the transits on January 6th imply that there's a clear, again, rehash of the 2021 riots. Of course, it is possible that the other side is agitated as well, but that's clearly a continuation of the storyline. Just as I just showed you, the Mars squaring the October 7th Mars right now is a continuation of that story. Now, I'm going to be doing a more thorough explanation of my predictions in a separate video, by the way, for my Substack subscribers. So now let's actually continue on. This is a meaty video, so we're going to keep going into the November predictions. So I haven't like fully divulged all of them yet. So this month, I think there's a wealth of information, right? Like with the Mercury retrograde opposing Jupiter. This month, information will continue to percolate and it will likely inspire people to either hold the line and hold their position or double down on something. In the context of this election, again, people will likely be waiting longer than expected on a verdict, and they might use this interregnum to intensify their cause or convictions. But in our personal lives, that might also play out. People could extol the virtues of something or convey a passionate message, and we are approaching Mars retrograde, right? So energy will be deployed in a concentrated manner while Mars is opposing Pluto until it dawns on us that we're exhausting most of our energy. Now, Saturn is also stationing direct mid-November during a Taurus full moon conjunct Uranus. This denotes, and I'll show that right now, this denotes a shocking or surprising event that changes the long-term trajectory of certain institutions. Now, personally, I think it could also shift your long-term plans, ideally for the better. Like, hopefully it's a surprise that works in your favor. But for other, and by the way, that full moon will actually be pretty close to a conjunction with Donald Trump's midheaven again. For others, it will potentially be the opposite, but in terms of like the surprise, maybe it's not necessarily a great surprise, but hopefully you'll avoid, feeling any resentment during that time. And with Mercury retrograde in Sag, we'll be revisiting our philosophies and perspectives. A lot of people will have a change of mindset this month, right? With either political candidates or their own belief systems generally. We have a Scorpio new moon November 1st as well. So let me take you through the lunation cycle here. Sorry, I have to navigate the software here. So the new moon in Scorpio here is really intense. It's ruled by Mars and Pluto. Mars is opposing Pluto almost exactly, at least to the degree. Mercury is opposing Uranus, sudden information. Venus opposite Jupiter, perspective, hopefully on relationships there. Chiron trining Venus, positive healing in relationships. The new moon is trining Saturn, so it could feel productive in a way. And Mercury is trining Neptune. Some creativity could set in. But this new moon is a powerful new beginning for you, and it's a beginning with a new obsession. So, it is the beginning of a new obsession or awakening to an obsession. Like everyone's going to fall into some kind of obsession here. You just have to make sure it's a healthy one, essentially. Then we have the full moon in Taurus, November 15th, which happens to be my birthday. Great solar return chart. But this full moon's happening while Saturn stations direct. So this is like really surprising information. Surprising information that basically makes you say you're just gulping and being like, okay, well, I guess I'm doing this now. I guess I'm taking this responsibility. I guess I'm committing to this pathway. And with Venus now in Cap, it's like you're committing to something. Maybe you are committing to a new financial plan, new job, new relationship. Even though it's a full moon, I think that a lot of people are starting to initiate a new long-term cycle with Saturn direct. And after Saturn goes direct, it's going to reach all the way into Aries. It's going to sweep through the sign of Pisces. And Saturn in Pisces is a lot about health. It's also a lot about, so a lot of you are going to commit to a new health plan, I think. And some of you also will commit to, a new way of ingesting information. Saturn in Pisces has shown us where the media has been absolutely deceptive. So it's like you're not going to be trusting quite the same way in like certain media institutions, outlets, certain delusional habits you're gonna let go of. So, I mean, the full moon is a letting go period for a lot of you, but I also think it's a surprising moment that actually kickstarts a new long-term cycle. So don't think that full moons are purely endings. So yeah, surprises that alter your long-term plans. And then we have a Sag new moon on Antares, the fixed star associated with the Crusades. And this is the beginning of some kind of, or extension of some kind of religious war. I think we're in the last dying gasp of the age of Pisces, right? We are in the next 100 years or so closing out a cycle of like purely monolithic, monotheistic religions. Like that is being that's all going to change. I'm not saying that like religions ever necessarily fully pass on. They maybe transmute or transition into some other belief, or they continue on in certain pockets. But I think over the next 150 years, we are entering a completely different spiritual age, but not without a lot of convulsions before that. So this 9-degree Sag new moon, it's just going to intensify the religious wars. And Pluto is opposing the World War II Pluto pretty much for the next like year, 2 years. And Uranus is going to Gemini, which it was in the 1940s and during the Civil War. So Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, a lot of fire there, a lot of competition, battles. You know, we're entering an era of fire and air. Things are happening fast. Conflict is quick to ignite. It is going to be challenging. I'm just being honest with you. And I think that your role, though, can be to like help elevate the frequency, lead with compassion. That's what you've learned, hopefully, with Neptune and Pisces. But yeah, that new moon, is really weird. And Mercury, retrograde in its detriment, opposing Jupiter. There is a mutual reception there. But I don't want you to lean too far into that. I think it's kind of cute to talk about mutual reception. Like, yeah, we're glomming on to something here, but like, let's not, just bloviate and avoid and pretend like, there's just that somehow this is all going to resolve itself because we can see the opposite, the planet's inverse perspective. It's like, no, no, no. I mean, this is just a bevy of information coming through. And it's like, God, like this information is really agitating. This information is, it's like more information is coming to light that almost like kicks off some kind of like quote unquote crusade. I mean, it just feels to me like really bizarre. I'm not saying that like that day necessarily, though. I'm not saying that that day in of itself is necessarily like bad or anything, but I think that it will set some kind of tone that will continue to percolate regarding kind of religious conflicts. But, of course, on a personal level, like you don't have to mirror that. You can say, hey, like on this new moon, I'm going to finish a publishing project, a writing project. I'm going to realize the proper way to launch my podcast eventually. Like it's giving you a perspective on past projects in a media or communications sector. The new moon is also a great time for you to convey your true beliefs about something and to, yeah, feel steadfast in your convictions. And, this is an affirmation of belief in choosing your higher truth with the Saturn square. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the horoscopes for November. Now, you want to refer to your sun, moon, and rising, right? You don't want to just don't just look at your rising sign. I think that's important, obviously, but it's not holistic because the sun and moon encompass your personal identity as well. So we can relativize. We can basically we can translate the aspects as houses essentially. So like an opening trine is like the fifth house. It's not exactly, but it's close enough to be like, okay, opening trine ignites creativity. Closing trine inspires travel. Closing square inspires, career related commitments. Opening square inspires, property, home, family related events. It's just how it goes in you can call me a reductionist or something, but not that even like people really do, but I think a lot of astrologers do push back on the idea that you can make sun sign predictions, moon sign predictions. You just have to contextualize it and realize the sun sign predictions are pertaining to your sun, your conscious self-expression, the moon to your internal emotional world. And yes, the rising sign is most holistically how you experience your environment. So let's do it. refer to all three. And let's start off with Aries here. So I'm gonna back up the to Aries. So Aries in November, first off, the Scorpio new moon, November 1st, which I'm just gonna talk about in my head, and we're gonna have, I'm gonna visualize it in my head, but we're gonna, you're just gonna see the full moon in Taurus for this video for each sign. Scorpio new moon for you could definitely be a new sort of like perspective on your finances, your investing life, maybe your shadow work, and the ruling planets, Mars and Pluto, are in your 10th house, fourth house. So for Aries, I mean, the new moon could help you sort out some kind of like property related drama, family related drama. Um, you could maybe experience some conflict in your family, especially over finances. But, the good news here is that, we have also at that time, we do have, let me just go to that new moon actually. At that time, we do have Venus, in your ninth house. Let me just dial back to Aries here. We do have Venus in your ninth house, opposing Jupiter in your third house. So, I mean, I do think there's opportunities here for maybe actually some media related success and breakthroughs. Maybe in the eighth house, you attract some kind of investor in your media related project. But I think for a lot of you too, you are essentially initiating some kind of new financial plan. And I think that that could be really empowering for you. And I mean, it could again create some degree of conflict with property, but we do have a lot of power here. You could even dig into some repressed aspects of yourself and you know, basically I mean, yeah, like you could really heal some things, and that gives you this relentless drive with the Mars-Pluto opposition. But I do think fundamentally, though, this has a lot to do with like sorting out your finances, sorting out any debt-related situations, and deciding how you want to maybe pay off debt, um, maybe take out a loan eventually, etc. And then the Taurus full moon on November 15th, while Saturn's stationing direct, has a lot to do again with possessions, values, personal values, money, and the chart ruler is Venus in the 10th. So I think for Aries, you may transition into a new salary during this time. Some of you could acquire a new job or position because Venus is in the 10th and Venus rules the full moon there. So for Aries, I think you should look at early November as like sorting out like shared possessions, shared assets, finances, investing strategies. By the middle of the month, you're celebrating some kind of salary related milestone, financial milestone, or during that new moon in Scorpio, you are agreeing to merge your assets with somebody, but by the full moon, also if you decide to transition into a new career, it's like one that reflects your values, right? And with Saturn direct in the 12th, hopefully it reflects a sort of a groundedness in your spirituality in a lot of ways, and a clear long-term perspective on how you want to heal, how you want to live out your spiritual values, how you want to even maybe help people participate in a humanitarian cause in the 12th house. And then the Sag new moon on November 30th in your ninth house, it does square Saturn, and there is a Jupiter opposition to a retrograde Mercury in your ninth house. But that full moon, which I'll go to right here, and I'm only going to jump to the new and full moons for Aries here. The rest I'm just going to kind of like visualize. But if we go to that, we have Aries, or the Mercury retrograde in the ninth. So in some respects, you might actually be taking a long distance trip here, but for others, well, Mercury's retrograde, like you just want to plan ahead for delays, obviously, with those long distance trips. But I do think that you might be motivated here to like take that long distance trip, or to wrap up again a media related project, an educational pursuit that you didn't finish yet, completing coursework or something like that, and maybe even like committing to revisiting your philosophy, your perspective on life, and opposing Jupiter. Yeah, I think a lot of you will have epiphanies on that new moon, and you will realize like what your true beliefs actually are. So now let's go into Taurus. For Taurus, we do have the Scorpio new moon in your seventh house of partnership. So November 1st, that new moon could really establish a new relationship for you, or it could just like set a completely new tone in your relationships, your existing ones. And with Scorpio dealing with like money, transformation, other topics like that, physical intimacy, some of you will decide to, in the same way as Aries, even though it's not in the eighth house here, this new moon, you may decide to make a certain financial commitment with a business partner, a romantic partner. You could align your finances. You also may be dealing with, well, I mean, you could experience just like a physically intimate relationship at that time. We also do have Mercury, opposing Uranus with Mercury in the seventh. So at that time, so surprising information could come to light there. And with in a conversation with a partner, you may see your partner in a new light. You may get information that just completely changes, yeah, your relationship. Or you could have innovative discussions with significant people in your life, but you are really setting a new sort of energy with your relationships on November 1st. And then the full moon in Taurus in your sign on November 15th is definitely a very powerful release for you. You could decide to liberate yourself, free yourself from any situation that's, gone stale. You could also just discover something surprising about anything in your life, really. You could tap into new forms of innovation, actually, with Uranus there. You could realize, hey, like, I want to play a different role in the Pluto Aquarius transit and era for the next 2 decades. I mean, that's how big this full moon is because Pluto enters Uranus's sign a few days later in your 10th house. So I think a lot of you are actually changing your career path. In like it seems subtle, but it's really not. Like the fact that Pluto is entering Uranus's sign, like literally 4 days after this new moon or full moon conjunct Uranus, tells me that a lot of you are stepping up and into a more innovative career. So like, and it could be anything. Like maybe right now you're a content creator and you've decided, I want to be a gamer. I want to like get on Twitch or something and create $1 million business or $1 million account through that or something. Like that is like how creative this full moon can be for you. Other people will find out surprising information and be forced to let something go because of that. But ideally, this is just like a positive epiphany that cements you as like a pivotal player in the Pluto and Aquarius transit through the lens of your career. Now, Mars will be in your fourth house at that time. So you will start to feel maybe some conflict and tension with your family as well, or you'll just feel more independent from them. We will have Mercury square Saturn with Mercury in the eighth, still not retrograde, but Mercury in a pre-shadow opposing Jupiter. So a lot of you also will be gaining greater perspective on your investments, your business, your finances. And with Saturn direct in the 11th, I think you'll have a better long-term strategy with either social media, the communities you want to participate in, and your friendships. Like you'll realize maybe like which I don't know, which friendships you want to commit to. And then November 30th, we have the Sag new moon in your eighth house. And that occurs again during a Mercury retrograde opposing Jupiter. And the Sag new moon in the eighth shows me that you're continuing to resolve some like investing related questions. So maybe you're still finessing your financial strategy. Maybe you're reflecting on shadow work. Maybe you're reflecting on how you combine assets with a partner. Maybe you're reflecting on your, I don't know, how you pursue physical intimacy or something. And the eighth house can be also with eighth house in Sag and Mercury in Sag. You could be reflecting on travel related investments. But yeah, so I think for Taurus, you're having a really big month. Um, Gemini's, the Scorpio new moon on November 1st is in your sixth house of work, health, routines. And, the Scorpio new moon is ruled by Mars and Pluto, which will actually be in your second house and eighth house. So I think any new moon in the sixth is a good opportunity to kind of like reset your daily routines, commit to a new daily routine or work project, to just reorganize how you go through your day to day, to start on kind of like a new health regimen, diet, nutrition, exercise plan. Um, but the ruling planets in the second house and eighth house are showing that, there could be some conflicts financially with some people. You could be clashing about what to do financially, or you could be clashing over your value system, over custody, possessions, shared resources. But with, Mars in the second house, uh, I think that some of you are, I don't know, like maybe you're just investing or spending money on things related to your health. I mean, it could be that simple. But we also do have at that time Mercury opposing Uranus, and this could lead to some sort of surprising information, either about like a coworker, or maybe suddenly an epiphany will come in about how to approach your health. Maybe suddenly you will want to like shuffle around your daily routines. There is an opportunity here to integrate technology somehow into your workplace to streamline something. So actually for Gemini, this is a good time to get into like ChatGPT or something, or some AI interface. And yeah, Venus is in Sag, remember, opposing Jupiter. So I think what's great about the Scorpio new moon and that time period for Geminis is that, Venus opposing Jupiter from the seventh house to the first house actually can like really reignite some optimism in a relationship. It could lead to a positive working relationship with the new moon in the sixth and squaring Saturn though in the 12th. I do think that some of your relationship opportunities somehow are clashing maybe a little bit with your career responsibilities, but I think for Geminis and Sagittarius, by the way, early November is a very successful time for you, I think, with when it comes to relationships. And you should really view this as a time where you can just like find more serendipitous connections. Now, the Taurus full moon in the 12th house is a great full moon for resting and relaxing. It's not a great new moon for like pushing ahead with a lot of new things. I mean, this is an ultimate release in the 12th house. So meditate, take a bath, like just relax, recharge your batteries. And Saturn will station direct that day in your 10th house. So like what I would recommend is chilling out on the actual full moon, thinking about what no longer serves you, releasing that in order to press ahead with that new long-term commitment in your career, because Saturn direct is showing that you know where you're going now in your career, and also you realize the extent of the commitments, and you're not afraid of those commitments after that full moon. You're like, hey, maybe you'll have a really powerful dream that night on that full moon, and it just like inspires you to, reach a new level in your career. Venus is in the eighth. Yeah, you're focused on like deeper relationships and even money and finance at that time. And Mars has gone into your third, so you are feeling slightly argumentative with the Mars pre-shadow, but also highly analytical maybe, and busy. You are busy, so even more reason to take a break on the full moon. But the full moon can be like your reset, cleansing, detoxing before you lunge forward in your career. And then we have a Sag new moon on November 30th in your seventh house. So the Sag new moon is during a Mercury retrograde. So I would tell you, hey, go find a new relationship. It's great for that. But with Mercury retrograde, it could be the beginning of closure with an ex, or it could be the beginning of a reset in your relationships, a reflection of your relationships. Could be the beginning of revisiting an old professional partnership, or revisiting a consultation you had. Just reflecting on relationships generally and learning more about them. But yeah, I mean, Geminis will be tempted, I think, to return maybe to an ex or something. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's all that yeah, it's not all that bad. Because it doesn't have to be like, oh, I can't get over my ex all of a sudden. It could be like, hey, now I've like really cleared up all the weirdness in an old relationship, and also I know much better now like how to approach relationships in the future. And opposing Jupiter, I think the perspectives are really healthy for you there. And the new moon is squaring Saturn, so some of you could decide to, well, some of you could be caught in a bind between like, yeah, pursuing your some relationship thing and your career obligations. So you'll have to maybe create balance there. Cancers, the Scorpio new moon's in your fifth house of creativity, amusements, romance, and your inner child or children. So for Cancers, the Scorpio new moon is a great time to kick off a new creative project, to be more expressive, and that's right around Halloween, right? So I think you can have a really fun Halloween. It's also a great new moon for, just committing to cultivating your own inner child. Maybe some of you will go on a date. That's really fun. And Venus opposite Jupiter at that time in your, sixth house, 12th house could create more balance in your day-to-day work. Maybe you'll feel less overburdened by things. But at the same time, the new moon is sort of overshadowed in a way by the Mars-Pluto opposition. So some of you are dealing with like a lot of tension in your families, stress in your families. Maybe you are dealing with a lot of tension in your relationships. I think Cancers and Capricorns have had the toughest go with relationships the last month or so, even the last 2 months, ever since Mars entered Cancer. So, I mean, view this as a time though to like really restore the right type of passion in your relationships. Like not the negative like tension, but like create positive tension, right? And bring in that romance, balance out your daily life, balance out your health, your health routines. Like you can even find joy in being creative with your partner, like play video games, board games with them, do something, right? Like just bring back the excitement. Then the full moon in Taurus is in your 11th house of community, social media, friendship. And so November 15th, you could really break through to another level on your social media. You could celebrate a social media related milestone. You could join in with a community of friends, celebrate with them. Some of you could let go of a friendship, but a lot of you will achieve virality on social media, or you will connect with the community in a powerful way, or you know, you may just realize a community you don't want to be a part of. But Venus will also be in your seventh house at that time. So you'll be focused on long-term relationships in general, whether that's friendships or otherwise, business partnerships too. Saturn direct in your ninth house is showing you where your true perspective lies. You are deciding what your true philosophy is, and you are being seen as either a teacher or you are committing to a long-term trip at that time. I think a lot of you actually will be taking like you'll be committing to like one of the most ambitious trips of your life around that time, maybe with friends or in a community. Mars will enter your second house, so you'll be very motivated and competitive about making money or indulging in some things. And then we have the Sag new moon, November 30th in your sixth house. So the Sag new moon is a good time to revisit your health routines, work projects, and maybe start to wrap them up. And even in Sag, I wonder if some of you, and this goes for all the signs, but some of you could be completing a writing project or media project, but like for Cancer, incorporating it into your day to day. Or I think a lot of you though will be reflecting on your health. And squaring Saturn, you might commit to traveling and working while you travel, traveling for work, some combination of those things. Or you will be teaching a lot of people on the job or learning a lot of new things and bringing that into your work. Um, Leo, you have the Scorpio new moon November 1st in your fourth house of home and property and family. So the Scorpio new moon on November 1st is it's a new beginning in those areas. So some of you could be moving actually. Some of you could be experiencing a completely new energy in your family. Others will be discussing financial responsibilities within the family, property related investments could come up. I think a lot of Leos are looking to invest in property right now. Others with Scorpio could discover some secrets about their family or something, or dig in to their ancestry or something more deeply. Um, we'll also have Venus opposing Jupiter in the fifth and with Jupiter in the 11th, I mean. And that brings about, I think, more joy, creativity, and romance in your relationships, and also opens up your social life. So a lot of you are connecting with more friends at this time. And we will have Mercury opposing Uranus in the fourth and the 10th. So some of you may change your mind suddenly about property or find out something about your family again very unexpectedly. And Mars will still be in your 12th house, opposing Pluto in the 6th. So there could be some tension or challenges with pets. There could also be some sleep, uh, a bad sleep hygiene. You want to figure that out. Some of you may be going through the need for a new wellness routine. You're looking to maybe like focus on your mental well-being. A lot of Leos have had trouble sleeping with this Mars retrograde, so like really tend to those things. Uranus and Taurus here, there's a full moon associated and aligned with it on November 15th. At that time, Leos may suddenly realize that they want to change the way that they take responsibility in their life. So it could be that suddenly you become a parent, or you change the way you parent, or that you change the way you run a company, or you suddenly have to change your responsibilities. You could implement a great change in your career. And with Mars now in your sign, you're feeling very bold and like you can make a new career related move. So a lot of you are changing jobs or stepping into a more assertive role as an authority figure or as a business owner or in your job. Now Saturn is stationing direct in your eighth house. So a lot of you are making big time investments, long-term investments in your business, sorting out taxes, debt. And that could be related to property or career. I think a lot of Leos here are changing, like pretty much changing everything about home, property, career. I mean, it could be really extensive. Mercury's in the fifth, opposing Jupiter in the 11th. So yet again, it's kind of a social time for you, a creative time. So get creative with that career change. And Venus is in the sixth. So you're really balancing out, I think, your daily routine and working with people very responsibly. The Sag new moon on November 30th is in your fifth house. So that Sag new moon it could really show you a new way to be creative. You could invest in your creativity more thoroughly. You could cultivate and nurture your inner child. And also, you could launch a new creative project at that time. Even though Mercury's retrograde, you could use that, I guess, to complete a creative project as well, or to just reflect on even your romantic life and to reflect on a past situationship, which I think is interesting. And I don't know, maybe the situationship doesn't work out again, but at least who knows? It could be fun to reflect on it or something. And Mars is still in Leo, obviously in your first house, about to retrograde though at the end of the month. So keep that in mind, Leos. You may be feeling a little frustrated at the end of November, and like everyone's an enemy. Just, be careful there and just try to be diplomatic and don't overstress or overstrain yourself and for the sake of like these petty fights. Now we have Virgos, and I'll go backwards to keep the Scorpio or the Taurus full moon in play. So Virgos, you have the Scorpio new moon November 1st in your third house of daily communication, local travel, siblings, neighbors, education, writing. So the Scorpio new moon is a great time for you to, really hone in on and focus on your writing projects, your communication projects, to start learning something new, to change your local commute or something about it. Yeah, I mean, it's also just maybe a time where you're having significant conversations, deep ones as well. And Mars is opposing Pluto in the 11th and 5th there. So some of you could be really focused on communication projects that you want to bring into your social media world, or, you could be having a lot of intense discussions with friends. Maybe some Virgos have actually been very conflicted with friends. Friends maybe or communities have caused you stress, but on this Scorpio new moon, I think you are communicating something very deep with someone, and I think you're like forming a deeper bond with somebody through that conversation. Or maybe you're just like learning about topics at a deeper level, which could be really great. Venus will be opposing Jupiter. So I think that there could be some positive energy flowing through your home, property, family life. And so I think that's the bright spot there. Like I do see the possibility there that you understand like you decorate your home, you renovate, or you beautify your home, or you are getting along with your family. And somehow that's helping your career, or your family or someone you're living with is giving you a perspective on your career. But I think the Scorpio new moon is just like the initiation of a very busy time for you. Definitely a busy time. And some of you could just like take a local road trip, go travel. Because the Taurus full moon on November 15th could actually be the return from that trip. Some of you will realize you actually do want to take a trip at that time. And conjunct Uranus, you're changing your perspective on a lot of things there. Especially with your relationships, though, because Saturn will station direct in your seventh house during that full moon. So actually for Virgos, that's the biggest time of the month for you is mid-November. At that time, you could be on a trip with a partner and then suddenly realize whether or not you want to be with them. You could just like fully grasp like how your perspectives do or don't match. You could complete an educational project or journey there. You could finish your coursework. You could, um, I mean, I do think a lot of you will have an epiphany while you're traveling or something, but no matter what happens there, with Saturn direct in your seventh house, you will have a really solid plan and sense of direction with relationships. And actually, for some Virgos, maybe even a legal battle will resolve itself with the ninth house, seventh house aspects. Um, and during that full moon, Mercury is opposing Jupiter. So maybe you will just kind of like have a better perspective on how to balance your work and home life. You'll discuss things. You'll have a lot of philosophical discussions with your family at this time, maybe political debates. And Mars has gone into your 12th house, so there's an inner restlessness there. Your mind is really worrying about, and you may feel as though sleep is a bit of a challenge at times. But this is a great time to focus on your connection to spirit, your connection to the spirit realm, and like feel a motivation to heal, feel a motivation to connect with your spirit guides. And Venus is in the fifth. So you are capable also along the way of like committing to some creative projects. And the Sag new moon is November 30th in your fourth house. So the Sag new moon is actually a time where um, you could be moving. You could be moving to a new place, although Mercury's retrograde, so take that with a grain of salt, actually. I think it's actually maybe just a perspective that you're getting on where you would like to move. Maybe it's a perspective on your family. Maybe you are realizing that you want to complete a home project. I think it's actually a good time to start the completion of something, to begin completing a home project, to begin completing the moving process if it's already underway, to begin. But again, I can't stress this enough. I wouldn't like initiate a move at this time. I'm just saying, like, if you've already moved, that Saturn moon is just showing that you're completing home related things after having moved. Um, yeah, so I think for you, it's like I feel like there's a preparation here for like maybe again, just changing something about your home by the end of the month, but also, you know, I think there's a fair amount of traveling involved for Virgos here, or media or communication related things and educational things. And also, again, the clarification, crystallization of where you want your relationship to go, generally, your relationships. Libras, big financial month for you, just like Aries. Scorpio new moon, November 1st is in your second house. So you could be committing to a new spending or budgeting plan, a new financial plan. You could acquire a new job at this time. You could kind of start to like establish what your values truly are and live those out through your job. You could attract a job that reflects your values quite well. You might just spend a lot of money though, honestly, on this new moon. With Mars in the 10th, some of you are initiating a new career cycle. You're taking a big risk in your career. If you take that risk, that could come with some debt though, or something. You just want to like calibrate with that, factor that in. Venus is in the third, opposing Jupiter in the ninth. I think a lot of you are actually spending money on travel. Like I think I said that for Aries too. Um, or you will be making a lot of progress with a writing project or media project. And some of you could smooth out any tense relationships like or dynamics with siblings or neighbors or relatives. And at this time, we also have Mercury opposing Uranus. So that is bringing about sudden new perspectives about money, finances, and your values could change there. Your investment strategy could change. But I think a lot of you are focused on money here. And then the Scorpio, or sorry, the Taurus full moon, November 15th, is in your eighth house of yet again investing, financing. You could celebrate a milestone with your financing. Maybe you pay off debt. Maybe you reallocate your assets and investments in a better way. Or maybe there are some epiphanies coming through. Excavation of repressed memories, shadow work could ensue. Also, with Saturn stationing direct in your sixth house, I think a lot of you are discovering that you want to make a commitment to um, a different type of like health practice, daily routine. I think a lot of Libras have probably struggled with health a little bit the last year or two, and with these Pisces transits in the sixth. But now I think you really, over the next year, especially while the North Node goes into the sixth, you're really like feeling strong, feeling like you can commit to a certain like routine that optimizes health and also working more efficiently here. And during this full moon, Mercury opposes Jupiter. So there is a lot of successful communication, though. Like you're learning a lot, talking a lot with people. You are maybe seen as a teacher at this time. Even though it's a pre-shadow, I still think that you are like maybe revisiting books you haven't finished. Maybe you're revisiting books you haven't written yet or finished writing yet. Maybe you're, revisiting courses you've taken. So for Libras, like it's highly educational and it's highly strategic in um, the health and work categories. Now with Venus in the fourth, there's also some aesthetic balance you're creating in your home. So if you're a Libra who's like doing an interior design project right now, you could start to feel like maybe you've invested in that interior design project in the appropriate way at this time. Or you'll realize you have to change some of your investments with that interior design project. I think a lot of Libras are actually trying to beautify their homes right now. And not just because they're Libras. I think Venus going into the fourth during that Taurus full moon in the eighth, like there's some investment regarding home, family property, and Mars is in the 11th at this point. So maybe some tension is brewing with friends or communities, but also you could be highly motivated to play a leadership role in those communities. Then we have a Sag new moon, November 30th in the third house during a Mercury retrograde. So that's a new moon for having closure, bringing up or completing some kind of conversation that was unfinished, maybe completing a writing or educational project. You're seeking closure through conversations at that time. And some of you could take a trip, honestly, but you would have to plan for delays there. And it could be a trip that you're taking that brings you to a place that you haven't been to in decades or years. I mean, I do think some of you are wanting to return to a place you haven't been to in a long time. Scorpio, this new moon is in your first house on November 1st, and this is really a powerful reset, new beginning for you, recharging of the batteries. You can really begin a range of new things at this time. New home project, you could move, you could start a new job, you could present yourself to the world differently. You could, change up your look, your style, your appearance. And yeah, in Scorpio fashion, transform yourself. And at that time, Venus is opposing Jupiter. So I do think that for some of you, it could be financially positive. There could be a lot of growth in your income. You could attract a new job, definitely. Some of you will be arguing about philosophy, where you want to travel. Also, yeah, you could experience some kind of strife or stress with people about regarding perspective. And also, I think there's a lot of financial discussions going on at this time. Generally, you're figuring out how you want to like, again, calibrate your investments. We also do have the Taurus full moon November 15th, which is huge, in your seventh house. So you're really reinventing your relationships at this time. And before that, on the Scorpio new moon, Uranus was opposing Mercury. So you are really having enlightening, illuminating discussions, surprising discussions with your partner or other significant connections in your life. And yeah, on this full moon, there could be some surprising changes in your relationships. I mean, you could see your partner in a completely new light. You could also, find an innovative, creative way to bring a partnership to the next level. You could even, yeah, you just get innovative there. And Mercury's opposing Jupiter, so you're discussing money, discussing investments with a partner potentially, talking about merging your assets with a partner. Some of you may let go of a partnership very suddenly to free yourself from somebody, but ideally you are, just re electrifying them in a lot of ways and having an emotional moment with somebody. But Saturn will also station direct in your fifth on that day, so you'll have a better go forward strategy, long-term strategy with creative projects. You'll take greater responsibility over your creative projects. You'll have a better sense of maybe how you're navigating the dating scene. Some of you will have to maybe become a parent or take responsibility over a family. But yeah, and Mars will go into the 10th here, so you're making big moves in your career, big new moves in your career. And maybe with the full moon in conjunct Uranus, you're finding creative business partnerships to help you with that. Others are, I can't stress this enough though. Some of you will very suddenly decide to leave someone. A lot of Scorpios, I think, will very suddenly decide, I don't want to be in this anymore. But that doesn't have to be you. Like you can control, I think, some of the outcome here. But I think where you're gaining the most ground on this full moon is actually like scaling up your creative projects and finding a very interesting community or partner to help get you over the finish line to scale up that project, I guess. And others will just be having like very significant financial talks throughout this month. November 30th, a new moon in your second house. So, like Taurus is too, like you're really talking about spending, budgeting, investing, travel budgeting, merging assets. I really think you're talking about that with somebody. And Venus at that time, right? Like Venus is in still in Capricorn, trining Uranus. So the Venus Uranus trine is pretty nice. I mean, you can make a lot of headway with your like writing projects in that end of the month, like creative writing projects as well. You could try to attract a publisher or something like that. So yeah, Sag. You have the new moon in Scorpio in your 12th house of spirituality, isolation, reflection, and yeah, like places like behind the scenes sort of scenarios, and also yeah, dreams. Like I think the new moon in Scorpio though is helping you to really dig into like your nightlife habits, any addictive tendencies or toxic habits. You're focused on mental well-being. You're looking to establish a new, maybe spiritual practice, meditative practice, get in touch with your spirit guides, and hopefully a new sleep cycle that will help you out. And Mars is opposing Pluto in the eighth and second. So some of you are arguing about possessions and money and having financial disputes, but Venus is in your first house, though. So what I really like about this new moon is that you could attract positive financial situations into your life. You could attract new relationships into your life. You could see your relationships more positively at this time as well. You could invest in your fashion, your aesthetics. Hang on, I have to do something. Sorry, I had to adjust some windows there. So yeah, for Sag, I mean, Venus in your first is bringing a bit of a harmonious energy into your life, I think, and you are just at least getting better perspectives on your creativity, your fashion style, how you want to change up your appearance or something. Some of you could experience like a glow up of sorts. And when it comes to personal relationships, you're seeing the big picture with them, and that could help you make better decisions with those relationships. But also, you're achieving balance with Venus in your first. You're achieving balance, like I said, through changing your nightlife routines, changing your habits, and really, I think committing to a different, like maybe spiritual practice. The Taurus full moon, November 15th, is in your sixth house of health. So that could bring about, I think, some, I don't want to call disruptive events with health, but like you may just like suddenly realize like, oh, I really want to think about my health differently. And it kind of could have began during the Scorpio new moon when Mercury is opposing Uranus too. But like here you could actually just be celebrating again a health milestone, completion of a work project. But I think a lot of you here are changing your perspective on lifestyle, health. Maybe you're changing your opinion on like whether or not to have a pet, like something like that. You could suddenly decide maybe you want to adopt a pet or something. Um, but yeah, and you're also maybe looking at technology and how technology can help you streamline your workflow. And then Mercury's opposing Jupiter here in a pre-shadow phase for Mercury. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of communication going on there with either people from your past or you're reflecting on old projects, past projects. You could also with Mars in the ninth, you might start to argue with people about philosophy. You might be motivated to invest in a publishing or media related project or educational project. And I guess like during the Scorpio new moon, by the way, on November 1st, some of you are fighting about money though, to be honest, but I think Venus is helping you restore balance there. And others will be pursuing like a physically intimate relationship or something. And then we also have on the Taurus full moon, Venus in Cap in your second. So I think any changes you make to your work projects, your lifestyle at that time should be productive and positive for like your job, your income, and so on. Saturn station's direct in your fourth house at this time. So a lot of you are finally making a decision about where you want to live, how you're taking responsibility over your family, and you're just like making some, I think, some pretty pivotal property decisions this month generally. And then the Sag new moon is in your first house at the end of November during a Mercury retrograde, though. So you are in some ways refreshing, rebooting, but finishing unfinished business in a range of areas. So gaining closure with somebody, wrapping up a writing project, deciding to reflect on your career, reflecting on your relationships, and then realizing, what you really want to do going forward. And I think a lot of it has to do with family and property related things, though. Um, so now we have Capricorn in, yeah. So Capricorn, the Scorpio new moon's in your 11th house. And that new moon, I mean, I think if you wanted to launch a new social media project, that's a great new moon. If you wanted to participate in a community, political community, or, any other type of community, spiritual community, humanitarian group, that's great. If you wanted to put on a performance like Cancer Risings too, like you could do that. If you wanted to get into like form a deeper bond with a community or a friend, you could do that as well. But I will say relationships are turbulent. Mars in the seventh, opposing Pluto in the first. I think for like most of November, you're still feeling like a lot of tension and stress in your life. And I think especially through significant relationships and Yeah, you could be fighting with a lot of close people in your life, but the Newman in the 11th is giving you an outlet through your community, your friends, your social life, your social media, and just kind of hang in there as a Capricorn. I do think it's getting better eventually, but Mars in the 7th, opposing Pluto in the first, for at least for the first half of November, can definitely be challenging. And by the time we get to well, we do have Venus in the 12th as well, though. So I do think you are hopefully finding balance, though, in your sleep cycle, your work projects. Like I feel like something's in related to lifestyle could be helping you manage stress there. And then we also have the Taurus full moon on November 15th, Saturn stationing direct in your third. So, I mean, in some ways, this could be the completion of a creative project. You could change the way that you work on your creativity. You could have a really fun creative performance or creative breakthrough. You could have a really fun blind date or something on that day. Um, yeah, Mars is in the eighth house, so I think a lot of you will have a blind date that's also passionate and there's like some kind of physical intimacy to it, maybe. Also, Saturn direct in the third, you might, you know, get a certification finally for something. You might commit to an educational program. You might suddenly feel like you're able to solve problems more clearly. You might have a better understanding of how to move ahead long term with a writing project or a travel plan. So, also Venus is in your first at this time. So, I mean, I think you are feeling, I think with Mercury in this 12th house too, like you're feeling more creative in mid-November. And I think that that is your outlet for liberating yourself from this Pluto transit. And then by November 30th, we do have Pluto in the second house. So by that time, you're really focused on wealth creation, investments with Mars in the eighth. And you know, maybe some of you are fighting about money or something or possessions or assets, but I think for a lot of you, you're looking to find new roads to wealth. And the Sagittarius moon, those in your 12th house. So during a Mercury retrograde, it's kind of a quiet new moon for you. You are focused on maybe your meditative practices, spiritual practices, but it's still continuing this creative sort of track. I think a lot of you could embark on a creative writing project at this time. Or, you know, you're just finding more clever or creative ways to like you're just like just stimulate your imagination, I think, at the end of the month if you're a Capricorn. So now we have Aquarius. Aquarius, the new moon in Scorpio is in your 10th house of career, November 1st. So could be the genesis of a new job, new career path. Mars is in your sixth, so you're also really maybe doing some strength training focused on the gym or really pushing forward in your work projects. Just don't push yourself too hard because Mars will retrograde there. So manage stress in your day to day. To be honest, if you get a new job this month, it's probably going to be more work than you bargained for. I'm not saying don't take the job, but just like you're going to have to manage that. Venus is in the 11th. I'm not showing Venus here, but like Venus is in the 11th at this time, the Scorpio new moon. So not a bad time to experience more joy in a community or with friends or experience more success on social media. Maybe going to a conference for work would be a great way to combine these things. And then we go to the Taurus full moon on November 15th in your fourth house. And at that time, there could be some unexpected moments in your family. Suddenly you could decide you want to move. You could decide that you want to, I don't know, suddenly you feel alienated from a family member. But expect some shocks and surprises within your home, family, property related situations. And Saturn is stationing direct in your second house. So you're feeling like you have hopefully a better, I don't know, plan regarding your finances. So maybe you're setting new financial goals, spending habits. Maybe you're deciding to claim a job that better aligns with your personal values. And your natural talents. Mercury will oppose Jupiter in a pre-shadow phase. So at that time, you could be doing a lot of communicating on social media with friends as well. And, circling back to old friendships and communities. Venus is in the 12th, so you're trying to balance out your mental well-being and your spiritual life. And I do think you're feeling creative. Mars is now in the 7th, though. So for Aquarius, there is some conflict in some of your relationships, but I think your friendships could be a bright spot. And then the Sag new moon is in your 11th house at the end of the month. So at that time, you are finishing unfinished social media projects, going back to old friendships or old communities, and also, with Pluto in the first at that time, you're really starting to feel like you want to transform yourself completely, but I think towards work that again resonates with you on a values level, and also work that you really feel creatively and spiritually aligned with. So we close off with Pisces, and the Scorpio new moon November 1st is in your ninth house of long distance travel, perspective, philosophy, higher education. So the new moon here could help you, start up a new educational pursuit, travel somewhere. You also might adopt a new perspective on something, pursue a new media project, and Mars and Pluto are in your 11th house and fifth house, which I don't think is the worst. I mean, Mars in the fifth, you could experience some conflict within your family, but also you could be feeling like you want to control a creative project a little too much, so watch out for that. But you could definitely press ahead with new creative projects. We have Venus in the 10th at that time, so you're seen as more attractive in your career or more charming in the public eye, I should say, or maybe you are getting along with parents. I know I said conflict in the family, but like maybe maybe your career is just more successful at that time, actually. Maybe you're being assigned more creative work in your career. You're getting along with managers in some respects. But I do think in your creative life, though, there could be some conflict. And then some of you are taking a long distance trip. And then we have the Taurus full moon, November 15th, in your third house. So you could be returning from a trip, finishing up an educational course. You could be finishing up a writing project, having a really awakening, revelatory conversation with somebody. You could, with Saturn direct in your first house, though, I think this is a powerful full moon for you. I think you're suddenly changing your mindset and realizing what commitments you want to make over the long term, what foundations you want to hook into and commit to and build on. And I think you're feeling confident about your long term. Now that Saturn's direct, it's like, okay, I finally have a compass. I finally have a sense of direction. Mars in the sixth could create some strife and strain at work, though, or with coworkers, I should say, or you might overdo it a little bit at the gym, meaning you might overstrain yourself. Mercury in the 10th, you're gaining a lot of perspective on your career at this time, and Venus in the 11th, there is an outlet there with friendships, but I think fundamentally here what you're doing is getting that perspective finally that you need on your long-term career. And then the Sagittarius moon November 30th is in your 10th house, so you are maybe starting a new career, but it is Mercury retrograde. So you could be wrapping up some professional projects before you transition into a new career, or you could reflect on the way that you play an authority role in your life. You could reflect on your parenting strategy and approach. And Pluto goes into your 12th house, so you will be going through a spiritual transformation in the next 20 years. And opposing Mars in the 6th, I think you're focused on, pushing ahead with new strength training or challenges new like workout challenges, or you're trying to like really be active in your daily life, but just again, don't push yourself too hard there. So yeah, today, a meaty video. I mean, we're talking about the election. We're talking about past predictions, future prediction, or yeah, future predictions, and yeah, it's a busy month. It's a tense month. There's a lot of information coming to light, and it may make people may want greater control over their lives or over others. Like you just want to avoid controlling people. Don't feed into control. Think about the all-consuming transformation you want to go through as Pluto changes signs, and just know that the old guard is falling away. The old guard is starting to fall away, and I think that there is a new social societal dynamic setting in through the lens of not only who the new leaders are going to be, but in the end of celebrity, the end of fame. Like fame is over. Fame is over. Like I think I didn't talk about the whole Diddy thing this time, but like there's a lot more developments with that too, because Diddy's gonna have Mars, opposing his Mars while Pluto's on his Mars. Like that is really intense and challenging. But I think what we're seeing here is you know, fame has jumped the shark. Like nobody cares anymore about celebrities. I mean, I was looking into my analytics and it said that, you know, 80 million unique viewers have viewed at least one video of mine in the last 12 months. And I mean, that's a huge percent. That's almost 1% of the world's population. Or I guess it is. So the reason I say that is because I emerged in the astrology community and on social media out of obscurity. I didn't have really any following 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, I should say. So what I'm saying is that my story shows that like there's not really such a thing as fame anymore. Like I can be recognized on the street a lot, but it's like I'm not necessarily like a famous person, right? I'm just somebody who takes out their phone, takes out their computer, and talks to a group of people every day. And so can you, and so can anyone. And if you don't, whether or not you care about that, it's like that has completely ripped the allure and the shine off of celebrity. It's like if I was invited to a late night show, it's like I don't know what the upside would be for me. Like, how would I benefit from being on like a Jimmy Kimmel or like a late night cable or network show? I don't think it would benefit me at all, actually. I think if anything, I don't know if it would hurt me, but I just don't think there's that allure anymore. And so people are much more drawn to what does the everyday person like you and me have to say? So we're entering that type of era. And as we do that, people who used to claim this like hard power over others, suddenly the collective realizes they just have soft power. I mean, in the sense that they don't really have any kind of potency. So people who are lording fear over us to control us no longer have any potency or legitimacy. And so I think that that is going to loosen a lot of the foundations. And there's going to be a completely new tone setting in the next couple of years with like, yes, geopolitical conflicts rising, but also in the nations themselves, there's going to be a lot of advocacy for change. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please share it, like it, subscribe to my content, and also my 2025 readings are finally becoming available very soon here. So you'll want to subscribe to my Substack, my paid Substack channel to get first dibs on those readings. But also, my 2025 forecast videos are going to be available for purchase in the next few weeks here. So you'll want to look out for that. And yeah, I mean, keep following me, give me feedback on this video. What do you think about my predictions? What do you think? What do you think is coming in the election? Etc. I'm happy to, continue to generate that discussion. And by the way, if you become a paid Substack subscriber, you get to do live readings with me every Sunday night. So thank you so much and take care.